move Daniel, Daniel, go the other way, 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 Daniel. Whoa, Lord, grace in a God. Whoa, Lord, sinner gone to hell.
Bienvenidos a Construyendo Justicia desde la Raíz. Welcome to Building Justice from the Source. Soy Betty Marín y trabajo con la Alianza para las Artes Tradicionales en California, una de las organizaciones organizando este evento. My name is Betty Marín and I work with the Alliance for California Traditional Arts, one of the organizations organizing this event. Queremos avisarles que este es un evento multilingüe, principalmente en inglés con interpretación al español y al lenguaje americano de señas, o ASL, por sus siglas en inglés. We want to let you know that this is a multilingual event, principally in English with interpretation into Spanish and American Sign Language, or ASL. Si no eres bilingüe en español o inglés, puedes escoger la opción de interpretación en la parte de abajo de tu pantalla haciendo clic en el globo o escogiendo los 3 puntos bajo más en tu teléfono. If you're not bilingual in Spanish and English, you can choose the interpretation option at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the globe or choosing the 3 dots under More on your phone. Para personas usando ASL, deben ver la intérprete en su pantalla y pueden escoger PIN para priorizar el video del intérprete, si prefieren, haciendo clic en los 3 puntos de la ventana del intérprete. For ASL users, you should see the ASL interpreter on the screen, and you can choose to pin their video if you prefer by clicking on the 3 dots on their video or on their window. Si prefieres leer subtítulos en inglés del audio en vivo, escoge subtítulos o captions en la parte de abajo de tu pantalla. If you prefer to read captions of the live audio, choose captions at the bottom of your screen. Vamos a probar la interpretación entre inglés y español ahora. We're going to test the interpretation between English and Spanish now. Si has escogido el inglés como tu lenguaje preferido,
If you chose English as your preferred language, right now you should be able to hear the interpreter repeating this in English. You can click on mute original audio if you would rather not listen to the original speaker.
Your preferred language, you should be hearing the interpreter say this in Spanish now. You can click mute original audio if you prefer not to hear the original speaker. Si tienes cualquier problema, puedes mandar un mensaje privado.
If you have any issues, please send me a private message and I will try to help you out. My name is Betty Marin, and we also want to thank Antena Los Angeles and Alexia and Jen.
También a Jay
Those are
Jensen
our
y Amber
interpreters for
Bertalut, que
today.
son las
Also,
personas
Jane
interpretando a
Jimson
ASL. Y también a Margaret, que está
and Margaret, who is captioning. Antena Los Angeles is a collective dedicated to building language justice, which is a value that the organizations putting together this event we all share. This right includes the right that everyone has to communicate in their languages. We are also trying to challenge the gender binary. So this is why the interpreters will be using the E instead of A or O. So for more information about this work in Antena Los Angeles, please write to the email that we're going to put in the chat. And with that, we're going to start the program. I also thank you to Amber, the ASL interpreter.
Program Building Justice from the Source, Racial Injustice, a national discussion of how traditional artists are responding to this moment in our history. I am Heather L. Hodges, and I will be your moderator today. I'm also the executive director of the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, a federal national heritage area created to raise awareness about the rich history and traditional culture of the Gullah Geechee people of North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, and Georgia. Our program is brought to you today by the Corridor and by my colleagues at the Alliance of California Traditional Arts, the National Council for the Traditional Arts, and the Southwest Folk Alliance. This program reflects our collective desire to provide a platform for artists like the ones you will meet in just a few minutes. Jake Blount, Sara Makeba Daise, Marquise Knox, and Latanya Tigner. They are all deeply rooted in traditional culture and drawing on that powerful wellspring to offer important contemporary social critiques of race, racial injustice, and notions of self-identity. Their work collectively encourages us to shape new narratives around contemporary cultural identities rooted in traditional ways of knowing, living, and making art, yet keenly responsive to our current moment. I also want to acknowledge and thank Jake. That was his song or his performance of the Gullah Geechee standard Move Daniel that you heard at the opening of the program. It's itself a song about the ways in which enslaved people perpetually engaged in acts of resistance on the plantation. So we encourage you, we'll send around some links afterwards so you can listen to it and listen to the lyrics, and we thank him for letting us use that track. At this time, I'm going to ask that if you're not one of our panelists today, that you mute your microphones as well as turn off your video option. This way, the virtual stage on your computer will shine the spotlight on the artists. We also encourage you throughout the program to begin to post your questions for the panel in our chat box. As we turn now to our conversation, I open by noting that the organizing theme I used for this panel was a traditional Gullah Geechee proverb that we must take care of the root to heal the tree. Running through all of our contemporary challenges around race, policing, and the extrajudicial killings of African-American men and women is the common thread of our long shared and unreconciled experience with race and racial injustice. For people of color in this country, beginning to heal from that means that we all must acknowledge what has been taken and what has been lost. A pain known by the family of Walter Wallace Jr., who many of you know was killed by police in Philadelphia earlier this week. It means acknowledging the troubled histories that bind us to this place and position us in this time. It is the act of recognizing the pain of loss of people and land. Our panelist, Marquise Knox, has a song that he performs called Remember Me, that is about the pain of this loss. I invite all of you now to share in the chat box the names of people you want to honor and remember who have been lost to racialized violence or in the last year to COVID-19. We also, many of us, sit on lands long stewarded by Native American communities who have also long suffered the pain of loss, violence, and displacement. If you know the names of the Native peoples who have shepherded the lands where you live, please share them in the chat. And now, it is time to meet our panelists. Our discussion with them will last about 45 minutes, and then we want to hear from you. And thanks to all of you who are sharing in the chat right now. I think it's important for us to realize just how broad and how deep this collective pain goes in our country. Joining us today are Jake Blount, an award-winning banjoist, fiddler, singer, and scholar based in Providence, Rhode Island. Jake specializes in the music of Black and Indigenous communities in the southeastern United States, where I live, Charleston, South Carolina, and in the regional style of Ithaca, New York. His work foregrounds the experiences of queer people and people of color. He recently released his debut solo album, Spider Tales, through Free Dirt Records, and that's where you can find his recording of Move Daniel. Sara Makeba Daise, with the purple background, is a multifaceted Gullah creative, interpreter, and historian, and writer. Based in South Carolina, whose work connects past, present, and future in accessible, healing, and liberating ways. Her many research interests include Gullah Geechee women, womanism, Black feminism, Afrofuturism, queerness, sexual freedom, Black informations, and something we'll talk about more later, the power to imagine and manifest better worlds. She's a living historian with the Slave Dwelling Project and a digital archivist for Real Black Grandmothers, an online archive centering the stories of Black grandmothers through the diaspora. She's also currently at work on a new documentary, Saltwater Vibes, which I am looking forward to because it's about her personal story, but one shared by many other Gullah Geechee people about finding your identity when you're steeped within a traditional culture. Blues artist Marquise Knox was born in St. Louis, and we learned today lives way out in the country in Bowling Green. His musical skills have earned him performing rights with legendary artists like B.B. King, Pinetop Perkins, David Honeyboy Edwards, and Billy Gibbons. And his talents have taken him around the world. His third album, Black and Blue, was released independently on his own record label and continues to answer the question, can a young man play the blues? With the resounding yes. Northern Californian Latanya Tigner has performed professionally with Dimensions Dance Theater, performing in multidisciplinary works rooted in African diasporic dance forms since 1986. She also serves as co-artistic director of the San Francisco Ethnic Dance Festival for the 2018 to 2021 seasons, and is a founding member of the Oakland Anti-Racism Organizing Committee. Latanya's research interests include African dance retentions in African American social dance, which has led to the creation of Dancing Ciphers, I think I said that right, an annual symposium that connects the coded languages of African-rooted dance. So thank you all to our panelists for a virtual clap for everyone everyone that's watching today. I want to start by checking in with all of you, right? As people. 2020 has been a challenging year for the country, but particularly for people of color, for African Americans, considering both the disparate impacts of COVID-19 on our communities, the continued wave of killings of Black people leading to nationwide protests. I want to know from you, and we can start with Marquise, how are you doing, my friend? How has your life been impacted or changed this year, personally and professionally?
Well, I'll say professionally, haven't been able to perform. I make all my living from performing out, being a touring artist. I was going to do a tour with ZZ Top and Cheap Trick in Canada, and then finish the year touring with ZZ Top. But unfortunately, due to COVID, so many of us been affected that way. And personally, I've lost a lot of friends during this time, and in the field that we've been in, and then some being DJs and different people. And a lot of them happen to be Black. And, right now we're not able to get together and commune with each other and stuff like that. But I think at the same time, not being able to perform have brought me closer. I think a little bit closer to the struggle and what's going on. I dedicated a lot more time, to recording myself at home and learning different other crafts. So haven't been all bad, but it definitely haven't been good.
Thank you. Sara, how have you been doing?
Hi, everyone. I am here. Some days are certainly better than other days. As I said before the panel started, that I was a little nervous, but I felt actually a lot more grounded with the introduction and folks bringing in their ancestors and the folks that they wanted to invite in the space, and also the land acknowledgements and the indigenous people acknowledgements just made me feel more settled and connected to everybody here, which is a good way to feel, because I have felt very disconnected. I have felt very out of sorts. I have felt very sad and depressed and scared and uncertain and angry and exhausted. And a lot of loved ones have died. And like Marquise has said, we cannot gather, we cannot be together. And even in the case that you can see loved ones, you can't hug them. And yes, it's been hard. Certainly not all bad. There have been a lot of gifts and a lot of blessings and a lot of transformations, and I would say affirmation that we will be all right. That things have been hard before, but that we will be all right. But certainly doesn't negate how hard this year has been. It's been real hard.
Yeah, and in a few minutes, I want to explore with you all what you're doing to sustain yourself, and family is an important part of that. And I want you to know that your mom just joined us, so your mom is part of everyone. I see people sending you messages, thanking you all for being here in light of everything that's going on in the world. Latanya, how has 2020 treated you?
2020 has dealt a hand, definitely. And I ditto everything that Marquise and Sara have already expressed. The challenge of keeping it going has been very heavy, given the charge of being someone who's responsible for other folk, especially as an artist and someone who works with youth, like being present and available has sometimes meant the self-care that we should be doing sometimes goes away for other people. And I found early on that I was sending a lot of the energy out and not bringing it into myself. So it was finding that balance of still being present, but also being present for self. So that's the struggle for me. But like Sara said, I'm here. I'm thankful to be here. Thankful that I haven't, like some have lost folk to COVID, but have definitely been amongst folk who have. So that's the heaviness that I'm sitting with right now, but still trying to be present as much as possible. Thank you.
And you all in California are in harm's way from the wildfires, and we haven't talked about, we could add to the list of challenges facing Black people and people of color is that we are perpetually and more in harm's way because of the way that we treat our planet and treat the land. So it's important to note that. Thank you. Jake, how are you doing in Rhode Island?
You know, I've been better. I probably have also been worse, but it's definitely close competition for that title. Uh, it's been a really rough year. I'm not gonna lie, and I feel like I've had a rash of unexpected professional successes that have sort of helped me feel fulfilled and keep going and feel motivated. But last spring, I actually came down with a viral respiratory infection, which probably was COVID given the timing. And it never got that bad, but it didn't clear up until a couple weeks ago. And I got sick in April. And I went from like zero chronic health issues, perfectly healthy, to having to use an inhaler regularly and not really feeling in control of my body. And it's been kind of exhausting to not ever feel at 100%, and has definitely made it hard to focus on the work and focus on things that make me feel fulfilled. But you know, that's been clearing up over the past couple of weeks, and I'm starting to feel more normal than I have. So I think I needed a long adjustment period, given everything that's happening. But I've been lucky in that I have not lost any family members to COVID, and I am just, you know, crossing my fingers that it stays that way. But it's a terrifying time for sure. And I know those of us, especially who have elderly family members and loved ones that are in assisted living facilities, are in a special place of fear right now. But what we can do is hope for the best, I suppose.
And you all mentioned, you know, this idea of being in dark.
Mencionaron ustedes esta idea de estar en lugares de mucha oscuridad y que puede ser muy difícil salir de esos lugares. Y me pregunto, vamos a empezar con usted, Jake, como acabamos de hablar con usted. ¿Qué le ha ayudado a sostenerse o a darle fuerza personalmente y también para sus proyectos artísticos? Sí, pues yo pienso que esas dos van de la mano. Para mí me parece imposible producir nada últimamente cuando no me siento muy involucrado en lo que yo estoy haciendo. Y lo que yo descubrí muy temprano es que el tipo de música que yo hago es música antigua de violín, de banjo, es música de comunidad. Entonces, hacerlo solo me sentí completamente inútil. Tuve que aprender una serie de nuevas capacidades mientras estoy aquí atrapado en mi apartamento. Y creo que Marquise también dijo lo mismo. Tenemos que diversificar en conjunto de capacidades que tenemos y también encontrar maneras satisfactorias de trabajar o maneras de satisfacernos con el trabajo. Y también ha sido un proceso de buscar inspiración de distintos medios. He estado leyendo mucho más de lo que he estado haciendo últimamente. He estado pasando mucho tiempo con el trabajo de P.K. Jameson y Octavia Butler. Ha sido de muchísima inspiración, y también pasando tiempo con la comunidad que amo tanto, que me parece completamente inspiradora. Ha sido
few months for me.
Do you think having the grounding that you do in so much traditional culture has provided sources of comfort that other people may not have access to or may not realize? I'm just, because I know I read an interview with you on NPR that talked about sort of one of the ways you began processing, I think it was specifically the death of Trayvon Martin, was to turn to the music that your grandparents listened to.
Yeah, I guess that's going to go into one of your later questions, so I won't delve super deep into that, but I definitely approached traditional music initially as a way to learn to handle dealing with racism and dealing with difficult times like this. And I would say it's continued to serve that purpose. I think once you start doing something for a job and once so much of your life focuses around something, it stops being as much of a refuge from life and more just the place that your life exists in. So my relationship to it has definitely changed, but I would say that overall, yeah, it's helpful to be able to sing and play old songs and feel that I have something I can draw on and really remember, you know, if there's a time to be living through a plague, 2020 is the time. And if there's a time to be living through the difficulties we're living through with regards to race and ethnicity and sexual orientation and gender and all the people's rights that are under threat right now, at least we have the means to fight. We are as short of the mark as we may fall so often at the zenith of human medical science and the zenith of egalitarian society within European diasporic countries like our own. And I think it's important to remember that a lot of people have been through the same things and with a lot less advantages and privileges to keep them going and count blessings even when they don't feel like they're enough.
I agree. Latanya, what is helping you get through all of this? Where are you finding comfort or places of healing?
Like Jake said, you know, in terms of like the African, you know, diasporic dance community, it's a community. So to be torn away from that, like quick, you know, in a day, you know, you couldn't gather anymore was traumatic. So what has kept me motivated is how people have redirected quickly, like pivoted very quickly to means of staying connected. And in this time when we do have the technology to still stay connected in some way, has been amazing to see, daunting to learn that skill set of having to learn all of these different new platforms and to stay connected. And then also teaching has been like, oh my goodness, time zones are a different, you know, a whole different thing of we're in this place now where we can connect across the world in an instant, but then that means juggling time zones, like how to, you know, and that's been challenging. But still being able to be connected and be creative and seeing the work that people are continuing to put out and the ways that people are figuring out how to support one another, be it virtually in this case. The company I work with, you know, we were already in the phase of creating work around grief and joy. So to lean into that a little bit more, you know, the extremes of that. And then looking at the work that other people are doing in the community. And again, how folks pivoted to continue to put their work out and then support the communities that they're working in. Like still being able to reach out to our youth via online and connect with them to make sure that they're okay. That was one thing that hit me hard and initially was how are the children going to, how are we going to reach the children? How are we going to connect and work with them? So that has been very uplifting. And then realizing that the things that we've already been working on just got more emphasized and brought to the surface even more. So we've just been able to lean into the work that we've been doing and continue to lift the voices and the narratives that get twisted and manipulated in a negative way. So that's been what has kept me going, and being able to support the youth along the way in the work that we do.
It's interesting you mentioned choreographing around ideas of grief and pain. One of the reasons we were excited to have you on as someone who specializes in movement is because people of African Americans do carry trauma in our bodies. And movement can be a effective way of beginning to heal from it, to recognize that pain. And so I think that the work that you do is incredibly important, because we don't often think about the fact that what we are experiencing as Black people in this country it impacts us physically. It impacts our bodies and the way we carry ourselves, and how we get sick and when we get sick. And also, we always say it's a site of collective trauma, that we carry the trauma of our ancestors in our bodies. And you can dance that out, you can sing it out the way Marquise does, you play it out the way that Jake does, but that's important. So we're glad that you're here to represent the movement aspect of it and what that trauma looks like when it's expressed through our bodies. Sara, I'm wondering, are you finding, because you write, and we'll share afterwards an article that Sara published in the Rootwork Journal called "The South is a Portal," which actually helped me really frame this conversation. So I know writing is important to you. Has that been a source of comfort and healing, to be able to creatively process what you see happening around you? And are you creating new work in response to what's happening?
So first, thank you so much for shouting out the piece. I was very proud of that. That was my first published piece. And it definitely was an outlet and like labor to actually to say what I wanted to say with that piece, to make the connections throughout the diaspora, and to celebrate the South and what African diasporic people do wherever we are, the magic that we bring forth. So it definitely brought me joy to get that out, to birth that, and it has brought me joy, people's responses to the work, sharing just what it makes them think about, what it makes them remember, the ancestors that come to visit them as they're reading it. That has made me feel good, because I want to be a reflection, and I want my work to encourage folks to see and love themselves. So yes, that absolutely has been encouraging. I've also spent a lot of time outside, being in rural South Carolina. Thankfully, I was not confined to indoors. And my mother has always had a garden, and I've been describing it to a few people in that, the garden was just sort of in the background most of my life. When she would go out of town, she might ask me to water the plants, and I might remember. But this year, with everything slowing down, I really started to see it. I started to see the plants. And also in our neighborhood, or in my parents' neighborhood, a lot of the nature wasn't cut down. I guess it would just be regularly cut down if things had been moving. But because of quarantine, there were all kinds of things growing that, could have been growing hundreds of years ago, I don't know, but that are regularly manicured and maintained. So paying more attention to plants and learning their like magical and health properties, and just slowing down enough to see, just slowing down and giving myself permission to slow down over and over and over again, because nobody really wants to slow down. And even as an advocate for stillness and practicing presence, I still find myself like, oh no, I got to earn the right to be alive. And that's not true. So yeah, spending time outside, also spending a lot of time with my ancestors. And I mean, talking to them like I'm talking to y'all right now. And also thinking about them, holding them with the lenses that I have the privilege and access to now. So viewing my ancestors through Black feminist and womanist lenses, and Afrofuturist lenses, and queer lenses, and acknowledging the systems of oppression that they lived in, and that they made choices within, which allows me to have more grace for them, and also allows me to have more grace for myself. So that has been some of the ways I've been staying alive.
And speaking of ancestors, part of your pre-COVID 2020 was, we talk about wellspring and traditional culture. You went back to the motherland and went to Sierra Leone to explore some of these cultural connections. Was the ability to go to West Africa, like before this happened, has that been sort of helpful for you? And
Oh
dealing
yeah.
with yeah.
Oh yeah, it absolutely transformed my life, the trip. That was my first time leaving the country, actually. And very much the ancestors and the creator meeting me exactly where I was at, because I was supposed to go. And so grateful that I was able to take that trip and see the things that I saw. And really a line that I wrote in the article, "The South is a Portal," is that nothing about America exists. Nothing about America makes sense when Black people recognize how vast we are and that we came before it. So that we are vast and expansive, and it is necessary for these systems of oppression for African diasporic people to feel disconnected, to not know our shared histories, to not understand our nuance, to not understand the ways we have all been slighted, the ways we've been taught to hate ourselves, the ways we've been taught to fight each other. The requirement for these systems that we live under to maintain. And that was something that was made very clear to me on the 10-day trip throughout the entire country of Sierra Leone.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about last week, is how when you think about contemporary challenges in the United States, African Americans have many lenses that we apply to these issues, and they're very long histories that we contextualize things in. So what happened to Ahmaud Arbery is part of a longer story, and we see things in a different way. So I think those multiple lenses are important for understanding you all as artists, but also how you're responding and processing what's happening in our society. So thank you. Marquise, you are a blues singer. Blues has traditionally been the way that African Americans have expressed not just sorrow and sadness, but also engaged in conversation with challenges around racism, discrimination, poverty, social injustice. So you are in an art form where that's integral to the aesthetic, to what it is to be someone who carries those messages to the community. And we had hoped to play your song, Remember Me, and I wanted to mention it, and I hope people will go and watch it on Facebook, because I think lately you've been performing it and introducing it with respect to what happened to George Floyd and other people. And so I'm wondering, for you, has the blues been a source of comfort, or are you finding places to heal in other ways?
Well, the blues always been home for me. I come from a family come from Grenada, Mississippi. My dad people come from Arkansas, so those southern roots along that line with music has always grounded me. As our sister talked about the farming and all that stuff, I was able to do some gardening this year myself. But for as the blues, I think it's important to tell the story of our people. And for me, the blues has been that outlet, and I can be as direct as I want to be in a song without anyone getting mad at me. Well, I may say something in a conversation because I'm very direct that way too. But sometimes you can put more in a conversation you can a song. But a song is like a picture. What you put in it ultimately tells the best story. And so I've learned to just, especially over the last few months, just to really try to bring home what's going on with our people through by using the blues. And then if you look inside the blues field, you can see the disparities that exist just within being Black in America. And I'll try to practice your own art form, and then you find those same disparities. It's like being Black twice, sometimes when you try to make certain advancement. And then you have people that say, well, if you speak up, speak out, make parallels to yesterday about today, people think you're not appreciative for being American, or they think you're not an American. And then a lot of time I find myself having to tell people, like, if you come here in the late 1800s, try not to tell us how to feel as people who've been here since the conception, because we have a different view and a different feeling on America. And I think the blues help bring that from day one all the way to now, because whether it's field song, whether you call it work song, whether it's chain gang song, it's all the blues. It's a secular feeling. You don't need religion to tell you that somebody's treating you bad. Though if you had religion to tell you somebody was treating you bad, then you may have a prescription or remedy for those folks. And I don't think people necessarily like to go down that route when we deal with religion and say, well, if it's been required of us to practice religion and be faithful, why not those who believe in religion now? You know, we got a whole set of people that's just God and country, God and country, God and country. But how can you be God and country and you see innocent people getting killed? Now, whether they doing something right or wrong, you just shouldn't kill somebody that's unarmed. But, you know, people holler about, you know, well, we should do this or we do that. So to me, the blues is a direct way for me to be black and as black as possible without feeling like I need to compromise myself or feel like I need to tiptoe around the subject or let's go around the mulberry bush with somebody. I can say that is black ownership right there. That's black. That's an original American art form, the blues. You know, without the blues, America has nothing.
Yes, sir. And are you composing new songs in response to what's happened this year? I'm curious about what's inspiring you to pick up your instrument and write.
Well, in the beginning, I wasn't, like when this first happened, I was ready to go to Canada. So then when that got canceled, you get in a little funk, you know what I'm saying, sometimes. So you'd be like, okay, I have plans to do this or do that. And then when I knew we couldn't do the tour, and then the reality set in, well, everything this year is going to be canceled. For a long time, I didn't feel like playing. You know, I didn't feel the need to play because I felt like I've given the world everything I've had. I've told them everything I know to tell. I've studied and tried to share that information. And I just felt like, you know, maybe this is some time for self, you know, because you can, sister said, Latanya, you can give people so much of you and you have nothing left for yourself. And so once I got over that, I started buying equipment and stuff. I said, I want to take recording serious. And so, yeah, that did lead me into writing, you know, a song called, it says, I know you seen them kill that man in the street. I'm just warning you, brother, one day that'll be you and me. What kind of life is this for black people to live? You know, you got to really get into it and tell it. So I've been able to write about exactly what's going on. And it's not easy. You know, it's not easy being 29 years old, black, and I look black, you know. There's no doubt about it. You know, when somebody see me, they say, boy, I walk in the store in here in Bowling Green. I stop even going to the store, y'all, because during this time, people will look at you and they'll stare at you as if you are foreign. And then sometimes you feel like lashing out against that. You want to tell somebody, hey, don't, you know, treat me as human. You know, I'm not an object. And you hear the snicker and the whisper, and, you know, people got something to say about Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, and you have to contend with all that. So I just find myself just writing about my experience and not really, like I said, I think we as black folks, especially during this time, we have to find a place of peace. Me and my brother was talking about John Tavis Willis. If y'all don't know who he is, check him out. We was talking about death this morning. We was talking about, I said, bruh, I said, I've been studying, wondering what is death like. He said, you know, death's been on my mind. He said, I thought about it this morning. I said, bro, that's the worst feeling at night. I said, after all the things you go through all day long, try to lay in the bed and death creep in your mind, and you sit there and you imagine, you say, you got to imagine a world without you first. Then you got to imagine how everybody carrying on. Then the last part you saying, well, damn, did anybody remember me? And he said, Quan said, I would want them, he said, if I had the chance to see what was going on in the living room, he said, I would be hurt if I found out people wasn't crying over me. I said, well, we better switch religion.
Thank you. That's powerful. And I guess I should allow the other panelists, if you've been similarly moved to create new works in response to what you're seeing, what you're feeling, we'd love to know more in real time how that work is emerging. So I'll open the floor to Sara, Latanya, Jake, if you wanna share what you're working on.
I'll go. Thank you for that, Marquise. And I just want to say I love your voice like it resonates in my chest when you speak. So thank you very much for that. Currently, my own work, kind of outside of with Dimensions Dance Theater, again with the dancing ciphers, looking at the roots and of African rooted dance, like how it shows up in African American social dance. And again, there are a lot of folk out there doing this work, and I'm so grateful to be amongst them. But looking at the philosophies of those dance practices, the cosmologies of those dance practices, and how you talked about the healing the root, tending to the root to heal the tree. It's like looking at those traditions and how they can impact us, like support us in these contemporary times, and supporting like young girls not feeling okay about how they present in their bodies, and looking at the importance of all of those healing practices in the diasporic dances, and letting the young folk and folk who are not in the know that it's okay to be who you are inside of your body, and like really bringing that those healing properties forward, and knowing that we had dances to be spiritually connected for healing specifically, and different practices among those things that we went to get through. So and just providing that space for young folk, and specifically in the African diaspora, and looking at those traditions and the rituals of it too, like how the rituals resurface, even though if we don't recognize them as the similar rituals. And then another, yes, I do dance with my hands. Another piece that I'm working on contemporary currently is with the students at UC Berkeley, who formed a majorette team in 2015 to support the African American athletes who make up the majority of like the football team, the basketball team. But when you look at the spirit squads, or that doesn't reflect on who's a part of those spirit squads. So they wanted to have an African American tradition present in the stands, in the stadium, to support those athletes on the field. And they've been getting a lot of pushback. Just now getting some support and being allowed to be in the space. So supporting them through a work, looking at, because they're just trying to have a seat in the stands. They're just trying to sit and be present and represent in the stands. So looking at kind of like the parallel, not to the deepest extent, but the sit-ins of the late 1950s and the 60s are just trying to have a seat, just trying to have a place. And so working with them and supporting these young women through a work that's looking at that. So that's just one way. And then in these times of rage, of how Black people, no matter what you do, you can turn your head the wrong way, and you can be seen as violent or a threat, And Marquise, when you spoke like being watched and looked at going into a space, knowing that they're seeing you possibly as a threat as you walk, when you walk into these spaces. And then Black girl rage, looking at the four different elements of rage, or of stages of rage, and how we are always looked at as being rageful, angry, and all of this. It's like, no, you're just completely reading the body language wrong. because first of all, you may want to read it that way, and then you don't have the cultural context to read it properly. So just working with them on that, to give voice to them in an artistic way, other than what they're doing in the stadiums and then like on the field. So I just thank you for letting me share that.
It's great, and it's a great segue into, unfortunately, what will have to be our last question before the chat is, we've talked a lot about different forms of resistance, collective and individual, and also sort of the need to push back against how people perceive you, welcome you or not into certain spaces. And so I want to shine a light just for a few minutes, because I think it's important for artists to have this space for there to be a moment of self-determination, for you to describe to us in your own words who you are. So at the beginning of the talk, I gave sort of very standard professional descriptions of who you are and what you do, and a lot of that falling under the umbrella of traditional artists, which is a term of art. To Sarah's point, it's a relatively new term of art, but the things that you are doing, Black people have been doing for a long time. So I'm curious about, as an act of resistance right now, how would you describe yourself in your work if you didn't have to use conventional descriptors like, male or female or traditional artists? Because some of you are going in unique ways, right? Jake and Sarah are exploring ideas of Afrofuturism. Jake talked about reading science fiction. So clearly your identity is broader than traditional artists. And so I want to close by allowing you to share with everyone how you would describe yourself, how you would describe your work, and what you hope people get from it. So I think, Sarah, we haven't heard from you in a while. So we'll start with you, because you do have a very complex identity that it was hard to get into one paragraph.
Yes, hard to get into a bio. This is actually one of the questions I was most excited about. So I love that it's rooted in the opportunity for us to self-determine ourselves and identify ourselves the way that we want to be seen. So I would identify as a space and time traveler, and a griot and storyteller, a shapeshifter, also a keeper of ritual and song, and also a gatekeeper in the way that Malidoma and Sabon Fusome describe gatekeepers in Burkina Faso as individuals in the community whose energies vibrate at a particular level, which makes them responsible for particular gates that access different dimensions. And these gatekeepers have their one foot in this dimension and a foot in all others, and guard those gates and usher and lead people through those gates. So I take that very, very seriously, and I am very happy to say it very seriously to y'all.
And now I'm excited because we've been trying to get Jake down to the Gullah Geechee corridor for the collaboration that's going to come when you two get together. So Jake, how would you define yourself and describe your work?
When you sent this question, I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm gonna say to this, because I don't think, for me, my musical practice is not an especially spiritual or emotional thing. It's a very academic process, and very much me making an argument through the medium, rather than me expressing something. And I think, as part of that, I'm always thinking of my art from the perspective of like, how is this coming across to somebody else? What message is this sending to somebody else? And I don't know what I would say. I think right now, I would just say I'm a musician broadly, and really embrace the fact that the genre categories we're used to using when we talk about musicians and when we talk about artists aren't real. And that the notion that you can only do one thing well is not necessarily accurate. And yeah, I think for me, so much of my art and my self-concept as an artist really comes from thinking about what I want to say to somebody else. I'm not sure what it says to me, Um, I just kind of evaluate it based on whether I think it's doing its job or not.
I think it is. The work is very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Marquise, how would you just, and you're muted, how would you describe yourself if you couldn't use the word blues man? What is it that you do?
Oh, I would describe myself as, I guess I'm very determined. I guess it doesn't matter what I want to do. I'm determined, you know, and consistent on certain things. I would definitely describe my music as ungovernable because I think, as my brother said, it's not about a particular. I know we deal with you know, genres when we have to, but when we step away from all of that, we know it's very roots. And you know, the blues is, like I said, the blues are roots in America. Everything else the fruit. So because it comes from knowing oneself. So I would describe myself just as being I'm humble, stern, personable, very caring. If I care about people, I don't message them, I call them. So I like to have that human contact. I like to, I'm a debater. So my music is Marquise Knox, you know, that's the only way I can describe it. Marquise Knox and the Black experience, you know. I grew up, my grandmother, as I told you when we talked last week, she was born 1932. My great grandmother, she was born 1904. My great great grandmother, her mother, was born 1863. So, you know, when we were sitting around at the table, we would get real life firsthand account about things people sometimes have to read about in the book. So, you know, I would just describe myself as Sister said too, as a griot, just somebody carrying along the mission, you know, carrying along the story. I'm a gatekeeper, but not a toll taker.
I love it. I love it. Latanya, we'll give you the final word.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything everyone has said thus far, and I'm kind of like in the position of Jake. Like I was like, what? And I appreciate it, and I love being in the what. So when we get those, like, have to write those grants or whatever, and it's like I'm like, there's I can check all of these boxes actually, if you know. So I would consider myself a medium, a vessel. So when ancestors speak, I just go with the message, and whatever whatever that output is, that's what it is. Be it a dance or, you know, choreography, or be it this, you know, a quilt, be it it's a, you know, some prose, or, you know, anything, whatever is required, is being asked of me, is how I put it out. More often than not, it's the choreography and the movement that gets elevated and gets supported by the other things. And that's because I was raised in dance that you don't pull it apart. Everything, you know, you don't, dance does not sit alone. Music does not sit alone. Storytelling and singing, they were all a part of, woven integrally, you know, into the fabric of the culture. And that's how it was presented. It was never one or the other. So that's how I see myself, as a medium to bring forth those, whatever the ancestors are telling me, and being responsible to community to lift their stories, however that's supposed to be. But dance being, movement being the thing that gets elevated the most out of that.
Thank you, and thank you all. And for everyone on the conference today, we will, before we go, put up a final slide that will give website and contact information for all of our panelists today, because I see the chat box blowing up. People very inspired and curious to know more about you. But I think what we need to do right now is do a virtual thank you to all of the panelists. This has been a great, I see people clapping in the chat box, waving. So we have a very complicated system for finding the questions, and I think someone was going to Betty, Bria, are you there? I don't see any questions on my phone, so I'm thinking they're all in the chat.
We only got one question
Okay.
from Margaret that is for Sarah. She says, have you done any fiction writing recently, Sarah? Your trip to Africa, your theme about portals and what we have endured in 2020 makes great raw material for your creative mind. Think of Gloria Naylor.
Yes, so thank you so much. I do think of Gloria Naylor, and I have actually been doing some fiction writing. I did, my master's thesis looked at ways that Afrofuturism could heal epigenetic trauma. And so I did 3 short stories, historical fiction, Afrofuturist lenses. And that was sort of my start, not my start to fiction, but my start of thinking of the literature as an actual healing modality and something that could be made into a tangible thing. So I have been working and writing, and actually I've been rethinking The Hag. So The Hag is a story that is in throughout, I would say, probably the African diaspora, was certainly familiar in Gullah Geechee communities. And I have actually been thinking about reclaiming the Hag. So when we think about looking at folks we've heard about and loved and known or haven't loved through the lenses that we have access to now, and absolutely very inspired by my travels to Sierra Leone and the connections that I saw. So looking forward to sharing some stuff with y'all.
And Latanya, Amy Skillman has a keen eye, and she wants to know about your quilt, which I forgot to ask. So please do share that.
All righty. So in 2000, first of all, I have to then go back to my mother, who's an anti-mate, transition in 2015, and she sewed and crocheted. She's from Hodges, Louisiana, which is northern Louisiana. So she sewed and crocheted and knit. And part of our punishment as children, I have a twin sister, so part of our punishment was if we did something wrong, we had to go sit and finish our crochet. You know, that was the punishment. So that's how I learned how to crochet. And so she also was sewed beautifully. You know, she sewed a lot of our clothing. So in 2005, I had the opportunity to, let me slow down a bit. Sorry. We had the opportunity to go to Brazil. And so this was my first and only time being able to travel to Brazil, which is, we went to Rio first and then Bahia. So that was Salvador, Bahia, which is where, you know, the Candomblé roots and the Ilaé, the Samba de Roda, and all of that good, luscious Afro-Brazilian tradition, those traditions are. And I picked up these postcards. These are postcards of the Orisha. This is Oba here, and then Shango. So there's 16 postcards throughout the quilt. And I transferred them onto Muslim and then created these panels here. And then I wove, these are actually individual strips of fabric that I then sat and wove together to create the long pieces that would, the sashing that would hold the postcards together. And then I quilted them down with long red thread and then put beading in different stones throughout. And then, and it's cute, it's flapped over the back of the thing. So it'll probably fit on like a twin bed. That's how big the quilt is. So, and then I had to put all these together. So different beading. It took me, I think this was like almost the last quilt I made, and it's almost 10 years old. 2005, no, it's 15 years old. It's 15 years old. The quilt is 15 years old. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It looks like we have some folks in the chat room. We have Thomas Richardson wants you to know, Marquise, he saw you at the National Blues Museum in St. Louis, and you blew the roof off the joint. So he came to the talk today. And then there was a comment in response to Jake talking about his art and his work, and I'm trying to find it now, but I think it was along the lines of, this person may have been a fellow musician and wanted to make the point about the ways in which some artists make work for the world and some artists make work for themselves as a means of expression. And after this call, we'll keep the panelists on so that they can read all of the comments because people have been very enthusiastic about, are very happy to hear what you all said today and thought this was a really great conversation and a really great panel. I see lots of exclamation points. Yes, yes, yes. So people are appreciative of all that you all have shared today. And I don't see any more questions, although I have, actually, here's one for Jake that just came in. I'm trying to keep up. Jake, when you craft your music, is there ever a moment when something emerges that you didn't expect to be there? And what's that like?
I think that happens all the time. And especially in recording my most recent album, Spider Tales, all of the arrangements and stuff like that were worked up by the group of musicians in the room together. That band had never played together before. I had played with each individual member, but it was definitely our first time all being in the same space and our first time working on that stuff together. It never comes out the way that you envision it exactly. And I think that's kind of my favorite thing about it. I don't really ever want to be in the position of being solely responsible for the way a piece of work comes out. And I think that teamwork is what makes it so fun for me. In the context of pandemic artwork, that's definitely had to change because I don't have anybody else to work with. And I think things still come out in ways that I'm not expecting. In the new piece, the new project I've been working on, it's had to be a lot more vocal driven just because of what I have access to and the way it's easy to build things out. So I've been taking old songs and I will sing the melody and then I will sing harmonies and add them on, and I don't really plan them ahead of time all that much. I sort of just play the melody through a couple times and make something up and then record it and then do that again with those two parts, and eventually it turns into something, and oftentimes it's very different from what I thought it would be. So it's been really fun to explore a new process, and especially since I'm exploring new subject matter and definitely new sounds in this new project, it's cool to feel that happening.
Okay, and I could see why we weren't getting any questions for a while because people are sending me very long questions. So we'll try everybody to get to as many as we can. This one is sort of generally addressed to the group, and we have a lot of people on the call that professionally work as folklorists or in the field of traditional arts. And Madison Howard wants to know or says, I'm a young folklorist working in Oregon. How can I uplift Black people and people of color in a notoriously inhospitable and whitewashed state? So yeah, some challenges. Oregon, Latanya, you unmuted very quickly. You have some advice for Morgan?
Well, yes. I just had, I think I read that, and I don't know if it was the same person, but definitely, and if this is not a part of the same question, excuse me, but in terms of like dance, make sure that you invite artists of color, Black folk specifically, to do the dance forms that come from those traditions and support them in that. Give them the space and to do that, and not have other people doing those forms. And that's traditional or neo-traditional African dance, that's hip hop, that's Lindy, swing, all of those forms that come out of the Black community. There are people who are still doing those forms. So bring them in and provide the history and the the history, the culture, all of that as part of that, because the erasure is quick when it comes to our culture. It happens so fast. And then you look up, when I have to look up, you know, pioneers or other folk in a specific African American dance form, the layers of video I have to go through to get to a Black person is amazing. So lift them up, put them at the front, let them speak first in that community, and, you know, just continue to make space and ways. And then if you're at an institution, in terms of like an educational institution, you make way for that person to then have a not just a part-time or adjunct. You make way for tenure in teaching those traditions, you know. And so there's a lot of different ways, but I hope I stuck to the question. I hope I answered the question.
I think Karen had a question that was similar with respect to, and it crosses over into, I think, some work that Jake has been doing in sort of the old time bluegrass space, where there aren't a lot of people of color as performers or audience members naturally. I know, you know, questions around cultural appropriation, you know, having to reclaim the banjo is something that has to be done. So I wonder if Jake, that might be space for you to talk about. How do folklorists and funders open up space for Black people to start to reclaim these instruments, these musical traditions, and that would include things like clogging, square dance. There are African, Latanya's 9, there are African foundations to those accompanying dance forms too. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about why that's important to you to reclaim those art forms.
Yeah, I think, well, I guess I will kind of fuse Madison's and Karen's questions into one in this response. Also, hi, Karen. I love that the Bay Area old time crowd is so well represented here. I think for me, because so many of our community dance traditions and our musical traditions that surround them, like old time, like bluegrass, etc., are formed on the basis of folkloric research that took place in the early mid 1900s. There's kind of a two-pronged approach that has to happen there, and I like that we got the question from an artist and a question from a folklorist right next to one another, because I think we artists have a tendency, at least in the old time community, to really take the word of folklorists as gospel in a way, and that's not to devalue the scholarship of folklorists, but I think we also need to be aware that throughout all the history of that song collection, of that dance collection, that research that was being done, those folks were making their own choices informed by their own prejudices of who they would collect from and whose voices they would accentuate. And I think this speaks to Latanya's point that we know there were so many Black banjo players, Black fiddle players. We know that the first generation of Piedmont blues guitarists learned from banjo playing relatives, and that's where that tradition comes from. And over time, that's just been overwritten because Black people playing that music were not Black enough to get folklorist attention, because the Black folks who maybe were more educated or were part of the ascendant Black middle class in the early mid 1900s were not considered Black enough, and the folklorists just went into prisons and got music from there, because the only Black people in their minds were Black people who were so Black they were in jail for it. And I think, of course, we should always be thinking about how do we prioritize the most downtrodden amongst our communities, the most disadvantaged. Those are the voices that need to be heard, and that's a good thing. But I also think we need to respect that in so many ways, the knowledge that we have as musicians through these folklorists did not crystallize in a vacuum, that there was a very deliberate selection process, and there were people who were very deliberately cut out of those traditions. And I think that creating more inclusive spaces will involve, like Latanya said, just prioritizing different voices, giving space to different people. And I think it just takes time, honestly. I don't think that square dancing is going to be something Black people are like comfortable doing again overnight. And I get asked this question a lot. I don't really have a silver bullet here. I think it really depends case by case. If you're talking about festivals and concerts and all of that, I'd be like, okay, well, we need to talk about who's on the lineup. We need to talk about what you're going to do about all the RV people with Confederate flags. We need to talk about whether you can really hold this event in the middle of nowhere in Kentucky and reasonably expect that Black people are going to go there to do it. There's a whole lot of considerations that have to be made. I think, Karen, to your point, because I know that you're in the Bay Area and those aren't questions that specifically apply to you, it just takes time. And I think that that's going to have to be something that Black artists and Black scholars really push. The idea that we need to be represented, we need to be aware that this is our history, and the more that we are able to engage with our communities and let our communities know that this is a place we have a right to be and something that comes from us, the more people are going to feel comfortable starting to participate again. It's just going to take time.
Thank you. Sarah, were you waving at me to add something, or are we just okay? So we have, well, actually 2 questions, one textual, one for you, Jake. The title Spider Tales, any relationship to Anansi?
Yes. So when I put Spider Tales together, one of the things that was exciting for me was to draw on the nature of the tunes and the songs on that album, draw on the history of the banjo as an instrument and of these fiddle traditions, and really accentuate that these things are all part of a global African diaspora. I think we tend to view Black United States Americans in a vacuum, when really like the difference between being from Virginia, where my family's from, and being from Jamaica is a boat stop. And the banjo first took shape in the Caribbean, right? The first written attestation to its existence is from Martinique. And Spider Tales, to me, referencing Anansi, felt like a way to tie the songs and the instruments and the aesthetics all the way back to Africa, and to really make the point that this is something that's been passed down, that these are coded messages that we inherited from our ancestors and that have the same significance and were passed down for the same reasons. I just love the symbolism of the Spider Tales, and I love how you can feel the importance of them, even if you don't always understand why. And I think that that's something the music shares, and I named the album that to sort of pull out that significance.
Thank you, Marilyn. That was something I missed. A great question. Marquise, you are a man with a lot of opinions. So here's a question for you from Amy Kitchener at the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. She wants to know, as artists, what are the ways your work can be better supported? Do you have advice, for example, to funders and grant makers or other people about how we support you? And we'll close by letting all the panelists answer, but I suspect you have some strong opinions on that, my friend.
Well, there's several things you could do. One, community housing. All that really takes is for us to organize and lobby people most of the time. Here in St. Louis, we got a land bank, the LRA land bank, where the property doesn't get sold through taxes. Go to the land bank and you can bid on it. And sometimes these places are in dilapidated areas where you can go in, there's so much vacancy that you can vitalize a block and reimagine stuff. And all that takes us to come together and just lobby people on that end, because you got to have housing too. Healthcare is a big matter. If you know how to introduce healthcare, people who do underwriting for that kind of thing, localize that and join folks together. I think the next part is when we find people that's really speaking up and speaking out, especially when they are a musician, support them, because it's so easy for us to get blackballed. Somebody don't like what Jake say, Latanya said, Sarah said, myself don't say. And there could be somebody sitting here right now and pick up the phone and be like, you ain't gonna believe. And then word of mouth stalls us just as bad. So actually support those that go against the grain and bring change, because I think selfishly, there are a lot of people who assess the time we live in and say, you know what? I think it's just best for me to go along to get along. That doesn't change anything. Then you got other people. I'm trying to think of Dick Gregory said it the best. He said, you got to have fire starters. You got to have people like Al Sharpton and Steve Coakley. You see what I'm saying? You got to have people that know how to raise the question or the conscience. Now, you don't have to have the answer, but you got to be able to do that. And I think lastly, since we're dealing with music, and brother hit it, Jake hit it perfectly. I wanted to chime in, but I kept my mouth closed. Line up matter. The way you, how do we package a project? It completely matters. Now, if you say you have a blues festival and you want black folks to come to a blues festival, even you could be in Mississippi, a place that got 49% black people. But if them black folks sitting around there, that they don't see somebody like Bobby Rush, if they don't see somebody like Marvin Cease, or somebody that really connects the blues to the blues, or somebody like a Marquise, somebody that make them say, well, that's me, you could never bring them there. And I think when also at the same time, when people see folks like ourselves get blackballed, that turns them off too. They say, well, why would I stand up and support this when people won't even support the people that's already doing it? And they on a higher platform than I am. They're raising a greater conscience, and these people have no support. So I would say it's all about lobbying now. We have to lobby each other to do things. We all lobbied each other to make this happen. We got to lobby people to bring about change. That's why I'm not necessarily a Democrat. I have certain conservative ideas, but as a black person, I understand that I can lobby the Democratic Party better than I can the Republican Party. You see what I'm saying? A lady by the name of Cori Bush is going to the House of Republicans. I mean, to the House of Representatives from St. Louis. She unseated a guy who was carrying a traditional seat from his father. Has been in the family for 50 years. So you have to lobby. You know, if you want to help us, lobby on our behalf, write grants on our behalf. Support us and make sure that we are in those spaces. Don't just say because you think you know us and you know what we're going to say that you will say it for us. No, put us at the table and let us say it, and then you'll know how we feel. You don't have to tell somebody, oh, I happen to have a friend that's black, as George Carlin say, was his mama black and his daddy black, then you know damn well he was black. He didn't happen to be black.
Amen. And Cheryl Shealy from the National Endowment for the Arts wrote, yes, we have to support the whole person. It's not just enough to be a fan of your work. We have to support the whole person. And musicians need safe and stable housing. They need affordable health care. So many people agreeing with that. Sarah, how do we do a better job of supporting you?
So I'm actually struggling with this question. One of my challenges this year has been to learn how to ask for what I need and really articulate what I need and know that I am worth what I need. But yeah, when it was asked in this moment, I was thinking that as an artist, as a whole person, as a creative, what I need is for people to really sit with themselves and ask themselves what they are doing and who they are and why they are doing a thing and why it is they think they are who it is they think they are and how they got to where they got. And if they are engaging, if they are interacting with me or whomever, whatever Black person from this present moment or from, some preconceived notion, some insecurity, some lie inside of themselves, and they are engaging me from not this present moment or any sense. I need people to sit with themselves for real, because I feel like the clearer we are with ourselves, the clearer we can all be about what we need to heal from, about how we can support one another, the ways that those have come before us have supported each other. Again, the ways that we pre-exist these systems. And those are things that are hard to remember and hold on to in a white supremacist, patriarchal, capitalist society where we're always on the go, where we're always trying to prove that we deserve to live and that we deserve access to things to stay alive, or prove, that we're good enough, to prove that we're enough. It is hard to slow down and sit with how you feel. And be honest about how you feel and why you're making the choices that you're making and why you're moving through the world the way that you are and what it is you actually want for yourself. I need people to imagine beyond this system, something bigger than this, something greater than this, something that came before and will come after this. I need creativity and beyond these systems of oppression, and that requires all of us to be more imaginative, and imagination requires rest and stillness and sitting with oneself. So yes, I need, as an artist, folks to get more creative and believe that this system is whack and we can have a better one. We deserve a better one. This earth deserves a better one, and that is what I need.
And we see everybody's in the chat, coming through in the chat room to
let me turn my mic on. You hear that?
Latanya, what can we do? What can funders do? How do we support your work and your vision?
Thank you. I ditto Marquise and Sara, and I will speak to the funders. So shout out to the funders out there who are working in traditional communities or folk communities who may be more culturally aware in terms of like how to engage those communities. And for those who are not, to like allow the language of the folk artists or the traditional artists to lead the discussion, in terms of not forcing folks to fit into a box of what your priorities are, like really examining your priorities, because there's a huge shift now that COVID has happened and we're in this like this double pandemic. And we've always been in the racial, the unjust racial treatment, and so that's always been there. But now that it's an acute awareness and an eye on it specifically now, and the shift. So I appreciate the shift that foundations have done, philanthropists, in terms of like turning project grants into general operating funds over the past. So that's been very helpful. But now going forward, as we're looking at like really listening, deep listening in the communities is what they need, and maybe looking at different ways of supporting versus a traditional grant, writing a grant. And that may look different, and that may be different than your regular operating, the regular way, modes of operating. So like Sara said, imagining beyond the systems of how we used to, or how folks used to support artists in communities, and let them lead the discussion. Let them lead the discussion in terms of like how you begin to reprioritize and genuinely reprioritize, not just because this is a moment, but this should be a long lasting within your strategic planning. This is long-term planning. This isn't just we're in this moment of 2-3 years of and then it goes away. No, this is long-term investment in these communities. So letting the artist's voice lead the discussion is what I would say, how you can support me, and other artists in that way.
Thank you. A lot of people in the chat agreeing and thanking you for those suggestions. So we started with Jake's music, and we'll end from hearing from Jake, the musician, about how we support him, how we do a better job.
I think I would echo in the immediate sense, that the most important thing we can do right now for artists is to like get them paid. And that can mean extending opportunities for instruction. That can mean extending different opportunities for, performance as you are able. I definitely appreciated Latanya's note about different types of funding and making different types of funding available now that people need different things. All of these are things that I would hope folks are thinking about. And I think I would also echo her point of people making sustained commitments to changing things, and Sarah's point about needing to change the systems. And I think that I'm looking through, the roster of people that are in this Zoom chat right now. I see so many names of friends and colleagues, folklorists and musicians and everybody else. And I think it's easy for us to think of ourselves as people who exist within a system. But I also want us all to remember that we make up every system, and that I would love to see folklorists more deeply interrogating not only representations of Black communities historically, but whether and why white folklorists who recorded Black people making their own music back in the day are allowed to copyright that music and are claiming royalties from Black artists who are using the same song, right? The fact that Jay-Z is paying royalties to Alan Lomax and listing him as a co-writer on a song that samples a vocal, that samples a guitar riff that from a song that loosely resembles one of Alan Lomax's recordings is like unjustifiable to me. And that's just like my most extreme example, something that I've been furious about for a long time. But when it comes to justice in the arts to me, when it comes to justice in the academic fields to me, I really feel like we need to be approaching this with a mind to not just the ideology and not just what is morally right, but also to where the resources are going. I don't think that we've grappled enough with the fact that every major musical export this country's ever had has come from Black communities, and we have not seen a tenth of the money. I don't think that we have appropriately grappled with the fact that dozens, if not hundreds, of white academics have created lucrative careers and accumulated limitless social and professional cachet for themselves by extracting information from communities of color and not giving anything back in return. And I think that we all have to be mindful of the things that we can do with what resources we have to support those communities. And again, right now, because of the situation, I feel that money is the way to do it. The greatest fear that I have for the industry right now is not the loss of venues, is not the loss of performance opportunities. For me, it's the fact that only the more privileged and professionally established artists are going to be able to weather this storm and come out still making their craft as their job on the other side. Had I not just won the Steve Martin Banjo Prize and gotten a free $10,000 from Steve Martin, I have no idea. I have no idea what my plan would be, and that's a serious problem. And I think we just all have to remember that a commitment to diversity in the future means not only making those long-term changes, it means also supporting people in the moment to make sure that the people who are here now can continue to be part of the conversation, and that we can build on their momentum to bring in more voices and to broaden our perspectives.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for everything that you shared with us today. And I hope these conversations do continue. And I want to take a moment now to thank everyone who worked on this program with me and champion the idea of bringing you all together to create a platform and space to share this with us. So thank you to Amy Kitchener and Betty Marin at the Alliance of California Traditional Arts, Laura Bottinelli at the National Council for Traditional Arts, Maribel Alvarez at the Southwest Folk Alliance, Cheryl Shealy and Cliff Murphy, all of whom championed the idea of this platform, and indeed were the initial people to come together to start this series that I hope continues, because it's been a great conversation. So we will ask our panelists to stay with us. Take a look at the chat. We want to talk with you afterwards, and for everyone else, and we still have 100 people after an hour and a half, so I think that's testament to everybody hanging on every word that you all had to say. It was amazing and great, and on behalf of all of the collaborators on this project, we want to tell you all who came with us on this journey today, take care, be safe, and be well. Thank you.